cool. So, hello.
Hi. Well,
Um, so yeah, I just wanted to, so you're going on tour, your first ever UK tour. So I want to know why now do you think is the perfect time for you to go on your first ever UK tour? Why not before now?
we had, back in the 90s, we were scheduled to play the Reading Festival, and that got canceled for various reasons. Our bass player ended up having some issues, and that's when Mace joined the band. But our first tour to the UK, why now, is because we have a singer that is dying to play out live and tour and see the world with the band, and we have a cohesive unit that can play live together. Without Chester, we didn't really see a way forward until we started having conversations with Cris, and we were able to pull it off live in a meaningful way that we curated to still be respectful of Chester's legacy. And Cris has proven he's a great front man, and so that's why now.
Yeah, cool. So, what would you say has been the biggest challenge you've faced as a band, obviously since Chester's passing, and coming together without him?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question was when we were posted to release our album Amends, and I think it was the end of March of 2020, and all of a sudden the world shut down from COVID. So I mean, that to me was a absolute tremendous hurdle. And then we ended up releasing it right in the middle of COVID in June. Think we thought it was going to last a couple months and be over, and by June the entire world had shut down. So that to me was the biggest challenge. um, but I mean, there's been quite a few. Trying to reinvent and rewrite the music is was a challenge for each song, and trying to write vocal parts in songs that didn't have stuff like in the chorus of Believe Me. I mean, there was a bunch of different challenges trying to find a singer that would play live that would fit the band dynamic. I mean, that was a challenge. So we had a lot. Cris, what's a challenge you saw in the band when you joined?
Well, the challenge for me was to equal parts make sure that I am respecting and honoring the legacy of what they had done up until 2017, and making sure that I was able to do it justice was and is very important. That'll always be the most important aspect of what I do. But at the same time, making sure that I'm not replicating anything, because I find that disrespectful in and of itself. Being able to introduce my own character and who I am and what I would like to express through this project is a very important aspect of it as well. And so that balancing act is and always will be part of part of my process throughout this project.
Yeah. So obviously you've got a bit of like some kind of, I don't know if the right sort of phrase is to say, some big boots to fill, you know, but you have in a way. So how have you found performing live? And I know you did a youth fest last year. So how was that, and how did it feel for you to be able to let a live audience and fans hear these songs that hadn't been heard for so long?
Yeah. That's a really good question because UFest happened to be our very first show as Grey Daze as this four-piece unit. And I had known the Grey Daze guys since 2020. I had met them at a private release of the Amends record, and they came out to shows that I was having through Phoenix. And so we had stayed in contact for several years before the conversation happened of should we try this together? Should we attempt this? And so I just flew out to Phoenix and spent 4 or 5 days with the guys, and just with no expectations. Just let's hang, let's get in a studio and let's play this music that has never been played in its current format of Amends and Phoenix and Stripped. And honestly, like, first of all, it felt great. It felt amazing to get in a room. It felt surreal, but at the same time, like it fit and it was working. The next step was to see if the fans wanted to see what we were doing. And so that was first and foremost. I know Sean and the guys have been getting hit up quite frequently for live shows. The fans wanted to see live shows. And so, we were able to provide that. Now, UFest being our first show in front of 10 to 15,000 people with the shoes that I had to fill already was probably the one of the most difficult hurdles that I've ever had to overcome. Not to mention the fun technology issues that we had on stage when all of our ears went out and we absolutely heard nothing but silence in our ears. But after that show, we heard the response. The response was overwhelmingly positive. And that's kind of where we came up with this process of let's let the fans dictate what happens here. And that's how we ended up booking this UK tour, is we wanted to see if the UK wanted to hear this music live. The answer was yes, and that's why we're coming.
Yeah. So going into this UK tour, how are you feeling about it?
We feel great. We were getting a great response from the fans over there. Chris and I were on a call the other day, and we found out that the Phoenix went to #2 in the UK, which we didn't realize. Or maybe we had been told and I didn't absorb it. But to have Amends as a #1 album in the UK and Phoenix is #2, I mean, that's pretty special in itself. So it gives us an opportunity to play live in front of the people that appreciate the music. We're very excited.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about the Phoenix, as yeah. So what was the creative process for the Phoenix? What did it feel like for you writing that, obviously in absence of Chester, as well with the men's, I guess?
The Phoenix was our second run at it. We did it the Amends and kind of had to invent the process. When we got to the Phoenix, it seemed a little bit more streamlined on how we wanted to approach it. And the three of us just sat in Kristen's house basically for a summer with our producer and wrote through each of the songs and reconstructed them and rewrote them, and then basically worked on them for about a year, a little less than about 10 months before we went in to record. So by the time we actually got into the studio at Sunset Sound, these songs were dialed. We were all at the top of our games, and we went in and just crushed the studio sessions. That's why we did so much work on the front end. I think that's why the album turned out so solid, was it was time to process and change things and make things right without trying to force it or write in that, actually write in the studio in a hurry. So it's one of the reasons I think that the Phoenix turned out so solid, is we put so much time in on the front end.
Yeah. So why did you go with the title, The Phoenix? What was the thought process behind that?
Well, Chester had a couple of nicknames in the band. One of them was Hephaestus, the god of fire. We always felt like we would say that he had this ball of fire in his stomach when he got up on stage, that he could just, become this immortal. And it was a way for us to pay homage to him without just calling him out by name. It was a way for us to give him an attribute, a metaphorical attribute that was meaningful, without just saying Chester. We didn't want it to be so blunt and generic. To me, the Phoenix says so much without having to say so much.
Yeah.
It leaves the end user to apply it how they'd like. But the context we meant it for, the intention was as an homage to Chester, who he was for us.
Yeah. I mean, that really came across for me. It came, obviously, the Phoenix, the sort of rising from the ashes sort of, or yeah, that I got that sort of vibe from it. So yeah. Let me just look through here. So thinking back to when Grey Daze reformed, how were you feeling about that? Like, what was your initial response when Chester approached you about that?
my initial response was, how are we going to do this? Because Mace and I haven't talked in years, and who are we going to have play guitar? Because Bobby had passed away. So, I mean, I was like, how are we going to do this? And then after he and I talked, he says, you're going to have to get on the phone with Mace. And so Mace and I had to kiss and make up and get through the difficult things that we had to talk about. And then the guitar player issue was a little easier to solve because we called Jason Barnes, our very first guitar player, and Kristen Davis, a mutual friend of Chester and I's, and had them come down, and that was an easy fit when we started to rehearse. So that's how we literally. I think those decisions were made in the first phone call between Chester and I.
Yeah. So now you're a couple of years forward. So what would you say, since you're coming back together as Grey Daze in its current lineup as it is now, what would you say is your biggest achievement, and what would you say you're proudest of?
That's a loaded question, I guess. I guess I'm most proud of us to have the fortitude to see the thing through and to bring Cris into the project and to be actually able to pull it off live and make it look and sound good.
Yeah.
I think that was a lot harder than people realize, because we had to reinvent a lot of parts of the process for us.
Yeah.
That's what I'm most proud of, being able to play the songs live.
Yeah, I think most people don't realize that these albums were not written with the intention of playing them live. Therefore, the boys were able to be very creative putting these songs and reimagining these songs. And so the trick was, how do we do this live? And that was a massive hurdle. And from the initial conversation in October of 2022 to the U-Fest show, I think there was like 6 or 7 months in between that period of time. We were working almost every single day of those 6 to 7 months to bring this project to the light, A, and B, to make sure that it sounded good. Like, that was probably the biggest undertaking, the most massive hurdle that we had to overcome.
Yeah. So thinking about your success and thinking forward to the future, what sort of legacy do you want to leave behind? What do you want people to think about in so many years to come?
It's a good question.
Go ahead, Cris. Yep.
For me, I think it's important to me that people see the authenticity and the character of this project and what we've done, what we have done with it, and what we will do with it. I think the authenticity and the character is really, really important to all four of us. And there's gonna be that group, that the few people that don't enjoy it, that don't respect it, that don't want it. But what we've seen is an overwhelmingly positive acceptance of what we have done, what we are doing, and what we will be doing in the future. And so I think just making sure that people understand the authenticity and the genuine character that we want to bring to this is important for me to communicate to everybody.
Yeah.
For myself, musically, I just want to know that I've written meaningful songs. If the song has touched somebody in a meaningful way, then I've done what I intended to do musically. I have a lot of other personal ambitions for legacy, but for music, that's my only one.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. So yeah, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Are you coming to the show?
I don't know. Possibly not.
Well, we'd love to see you there, Megan. We are going to be doing meet and greets for every single show in the UK. So if any of the fans have memorabilia they want us to sign, bring it out. We'll be happy to spend some time with you guys and shake some hands and immerse ourselves in the UK community. So we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, cool. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Appreciate you, Megan.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you.